Today, I'm joined by Chuck Pettry. With over 20 years of experience in e-commerce, live event marketing, and artist relations, he's now at Sandbag, a global music merchandise powerhouse. He takes us behind the scenes of the many cool experiences, immersive moments crafted for fans, making the music come alive in ways you've never imagined. Chuck is also a partner in the label Solid Brass Records, where the sounds of the past echo into the present. We dive into the art of reissuing albums from the 90s while simultaneously breaking new bands. Chuck doesn't just operate in the business of music, he thrives in the realm of human connection. So whether you're a diehard music fan, aspiring entrepreneur, or someone just curious about the magic behind the scenes in the music world, I hope you enjoyed this fascinating conversation where we explore the intersection of creativity and commerce. Hey, what's up, Chuck? Thank you so much for taking the time this morning to talk with me. I'm excited to get into this conversation with you.
What's up, Joe? It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm hoping that I deliver some great content. Like, I'm super excited to talk to you, and I'm very appreciative of you having me on. So, thank you.
You got it, man. Yeah, I mean, obviously we've known each other over a decade. Our
Yeah.
daughters are in school together and lived in the same part of town. Similar backgrounds with you and me. We both came out to California in our early 20s. You from a rural West Virginia town, right, to San Francisco. Can you guys just take it back to like college even or your upbringing about what maybe like brought you towards music as just an interest in general in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like at a pretty early age, I got hit with like the bug for like to me like all these things that we didn't necessarily have in our hometown. I started with skateboarding for sure, and I was around 12 or 13 skateboarding, which led to like music, like punk rock and art, like all those things. It kind of hit at the same point for me, and I realized I wanted to like have that like path, like I feel like in my life. I went to college in West Virginia as well. I very quickly, I got involved with our college radio station. And I'd say at that point, like I had already like a pretty deep understanding of some pretty obscure alternative music. This is also, you have to understand the time. It was like, Nirvana was like the biggest thing in the world. And, there's so many bands that were part of that kind of like alternative music. It was a really special time, and like college radio, it was great. And I learned a lot, and I also started booking shows at our college. So I was also kind of like working behind the scenes and understanding some of the more like more maybe the more like professional aspects of like the music business. Even at a very small town or at a college, but just kind of learning that kind of behind the scenes stuff. And I think that pretty quickly I realized like, oh, this is what I want to do. It was like, in a lot of ways, college is probably more just like a vehicle for me to, figure out my career path in music. You know, and then when I finished school, I was like, oh, I'm either going to go to New York, which seemed like the scariest place in the world to me, or I'm going to go to California, which I felt was like more part of like, even though I never been there, I felt
Yeah.
like just through like music and skateboarding, like that's where I should be. And, I didn't know where to go. And, I went to San Francisco because I knew like one or two people there. I didn't know that San Francisco and LA were 6 hours away. I didn't know that, you can't really surf in San Francisco or how cold the beach was. So a lot of like really fun kind of learning experiences I had. But, I loved it. I went there and, very quickly, I was very lucky. I got a job working at a record label called Alternative Tentacles, which is mostly known for putting out the Dead Kennedys records and a lot of other kind of really, obtuse alternative and like punk bands. But it was an incredible experience. and just like, especially being like 22 outside of, school and like in your first real job. And then, I worked there for about probably 2.5 years and did some other things. And then I just randomly ended up applying for a job at a company in Oakland, where I just moved to. That was making T-shirts for like Green Day and a lot of other kind of like East Bay bands from that scene. I was, gosh, this was 25 years ago or something, 25 years ago, and the company just kept growing and growing as Green Day grew, and and I got to work and meet with so many great bands and meet so many great people, and that it kind of became like an accidental career, and like I think back on it like at times like 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 was I like into T-shirts when I was like growing up or things like that. I was definitely into like more like skateboarding and kind of like stuff like that, and like I can remember buying like one or two like punk rock T-shirts at like our local skate shop, and thinking like, wow, like it's I've done something like it's like done something wrong. It's like it was such like a danger. It seemed like such like a dangerous thing back then, like to like your badge of honor. Like it's like you wear a T-shirt from a band, and you're kind of like it's like meeting your people or your tribe in a lot of ways. I worked there for close to 15 years, and then about 10 years ago, I took a job here in LA. And yeah, so now like I mean, professionally, I run a music merchandise and licensing company here in LA called Sandbag, and we work with some really like incredible artists. Most people know us as the company that makes merchandise for Radiohead. So, and I've been here for 8 years now, and I run the U.S. Operation here.
So you came down. So okay, so West Virginia, San Francisco to Oakland, down to LA, right? And were you playing music this whole time, or were you just sort of like working more of the business and the behind the scenes for these great artists, or were you actually playing at the same time?
In college, I played in a few bands. Nothing, I mean, great friends, but like this is like West Virginia. There were multiple times we got in a van and we put out a 7-inch record. I mean, and like back then, like this is 1990. 6, I think, like we recorded some songs with like a guy that didn't want to record with us, and we pressed a 7-inch record ourselves. And I mean, it was an amazing thing. Yeah. So I played in that band. And then when I came to San Francisco, pretty quickly, I was playing guitar and singing in a band called Hit Self Destruct. And we were a band for a couple years. And then at some point, we stopped playing, and I started playing guitar with 3 other friends in a band called Glaciers. And we're still a band. We put out 3 12-inch records, and we've done like some tours. We played a lot of shows. We all live in different cities now, which is pretty common for bands. And we got together a couple months ago. We have another album that's almost done. So I don't think it's something that I'll ever stop doing. It's like it's not. It's funny, like when you're talking about these things, and like I'm sure you'll ask me about like the record label too. It's I don't purposely like stack all these things. It's just something that like I like to do.
Yeah. So like so this background you had, right? So you're in San Francisco, you're inadvertently, started working at companies that are making T-shirts for bands, and now you're come down here working at Sandbag. Like at that company, you and your partner run the US team, US based team, because you're a global entity. Like, what's the process of like turning? Does the artist get involved, and you take their vision, and then you turn this into like merch, but then experiences beyond that?
It's half and half. I mean, I'd say it's a pretty even split. I mean, 50% of the artists we work with come to us with like a vision. They probably have a creative director, and it's our job to essentially apply it to merchandise. Like we might be involved in the discussion of, product development. The other half, they have
Mm.
no plan, no idea. But I mean, on both sides, like we always try and like either discuss with the artist, their creative vision to make sure that it's seen through to the end product and ultimately to their fans. There's not one process that's the same, but we spend a great deal of time on our artwork and product development because I think ultimately it's really important that people are buying more than just like more than just a T-shirt. You know.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, it's interesting nowadays. Like you said, back when we were in college or coming out of college, and there was these scenes where I was into skateboarding, you were into skateboarding. Having that kind of community was like a shared thing you could have with, yeah, again, T-shirts, like you mentioned, right? And
Yeah.
these bands probably had the similar upbringings. I know you work with a good deal of recognizable names as well.
Yeah.
How like does working with them, or just working at Sandbag, right? Like for your team here in the US, have there been any milestones or even challenges that kind of are like sort of help shape what you're doing today that you could share?
That's a good question. I think that we're most known. I think it was like about 13 or 14 years ago. We were the company that, we essentially applied Radiohead's vision of the pay what you want model for an album they
Mm.
put out called In Rainbows. And, it's funny because like it really, in the grand scheme of it, it wasn't that long ago. I mean,
Uh,
it's probably under 15 years or something like that. But,
yeah.
in today's technology, that was like so long ago. And it was before I was working here, but it's always what I've kind of thought of like, oh, that was like, in a lot of ways, it really shook up the music industry, in my opinion, where it was like, I mean, you know, it's like, wow, what a crazy idea. We put out this incredible album and we're going to let people pay what they want for it. Like, you know,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think that's probably what the company's most known for. But we've done like so many like amazing things over the years, and like it's hard to like even name one because every day, like you're telling,
Sure.
it's like every day is a challenge. There's every day is something new, but like
Well, I was going to say, my follow up to that would be what challenges are there? Because there have to be some constraints, whether it's their label or yeah.
timing's usually like the biggest constraint. There's never enough like time in the day, and like the deadlines are just like, I mean, it's just, I think that's probably the most obvious. When it comes to like designing stuff or making products, like, all that stuff falls in line. So it's always just a matter of like timing, and I think that like one of the things that I've always enjoyed doing is just being a part of like album campaigns. Like when we're working with an
Mm.
artist and like we'll do their album pre-order or do like the merchandise around it. But like I've always enjoyed that kind of like that setup and just being there from like I guess like the beginning.
Yeah, the inception, right? It seems like I saw on this site, it said basically that you guys have sort of almost like a family type of atmosphere with these like global, huge artists that everyone listening to this podcast would recommend. But, with this personal touch that you like to sort of, bring to the table, like how do you do that with these artists that might be multi gazillionaires, right? But try to give everyone like a personal touch when they all have different personalities and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that's I mean, it's a good question, but I'd say it's just like when you're dealing with when you're dealing with people,
Mhm.
I mean, it's kind of hard to escape that. We're like you're not dealing with like AI, like designers
Sure.
here. Everybody puts their mark on something, and I think that's really what makes us or other companies like special. It's like I feel like people will come to us because they like the artwork that we've made for others, and there's always going to be like stylistic things, but as far as like personal touch goes, I mean, I think that's what you want. That's what you want from like a company you're working with, and I think that for me, being in a position of leadership, that's what I want to offer. I want to be in the business of people,
Mhm.
because I think that that's like, it's a really important thing, and I think that's like every artist we work with, they get like an account manager, and they can text any of us at any time. Like, there's a direct line of communication, but I think that it's really important, because I think that people are what really that's what makes things special, you know and I think it's very important for
Yeah.
me that, like, they understand they're dealing with, like, actual humans.
Yeah, the human touch is definitely, as things become so, like you said, whether it's AI or just everyone staring at a device all day, that this human touch is really something that even younger artists and even more, veterans have to appreciate that sort of approach that you guys have to it. And I would imagine that, I've seen just like on the website, you've done pop-up stores, you've done, you know, you know, relationships you have with different outlets, retail outlets. I- Are there any like cool stunt? I know you mentioned the one that you guys did with the choose your own price kind of concept, but how about like more of like the experiential side, the event side that you've done that have been kind of memorable or stands out from?
One of the things we do that I think is actually really awesome is, like, we can provide VIP experiences, and it's
Mm,
either things changed a bit because of COVID, but you know it was very common, pre-COVID, for you, to pay a certain amount of money, and you get to meet the artist and have like a photo op with them, with some kind of like step and repeat. But it's like you're right there, and like, I've like traveled and seen a lot of these, and like, it was like pretty like, amazing to see like someone meet, like Blink 182, and then
uh,
people are crying because they're just so overwhelmed. It's a very special personal thing, and in most VIP today, it's because of COVID, it's more like, oh, you get to see the artist sound check, so it's like a sound check party. But like, that's
mhm.
still, to me, like a very personal thing. Like, it's you and maybe 30 to 50 other people in a room, rather than 1,000 or 5,000 people or whatever. But when you're talking about experiential, I think that is, it's very important in our industry to be able to provide something that goes beyond just a black t-shirt. you know
Right. So these, I guess, again, it goes back to sort of that human touch, right? Whether it's with the artist and yourselves, or the artists and their fans, creating that human connection that, again, is going to transcend no matter what decade we're in. You know what I mean? So thinking of like the future or technology, or just things that are going on, social media, how fast people are consuming content. Like, you guys have seemed to be still successful no matter like what happens in the industry or with tech. So are there like strategies that you imply? Is it just as simple as, hey, just keep this human contact, human approach, human touch going, or is there something deeper than that that kind of keeps you all at the forefront of what you're doing?
I mean, there's no exact answer for it. There's probably a bit of like strategy or business acumen, and there's probably a little bit of like resilience, as well as like maybe like luck. Like, just for an example, like, during the pandemic, there were no live concerts, and like, live concerts it's the majority of our sales. But what were we going to do? I mean, everything went to ecom. I'm not the only person that experienced this, but like, I think that it's probably a matter of just kind of understanding, like, trends, and maybe like buying behavior, and just
Mhm.
just knowing, it's like, ultimately, I don't think that, like, for like what we do, like, we're people want to support the artists. They want to be a fan. They want to support the artist in whatever way that they can. So I think it's our responsibility to, provide, like, a great product, but also be thinking about like what are some other things that we can be doing. What are other ways for us to help the fan connect with their favorite artist, and sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But the idea is that like we're always thinking about, I'd say, like the artist and the fan, the two most important things.
Hmm.
The reason why we're here, you know.
Right. And you have this background, right? Even in college, I wonder the label that you and your friends, Jason Pearson and Justin Sinkovich started,
Solid brass, yeah.
Solid Brass Records, right? Now that is sort of like a 90s DIY music scene, if I'm not mistaken. Was that sort of that venture? What sort of sparked that the idea for that venture that you guys put together?
Well, I knew Justin from a long time ago because I mean, when I first came, like I've skipped some things for you, but when I first came to San Francisco and I was working at Alternative Tentacles, I thought like, just I've always been so enamored by like vinyl records. I always have. I thought it was just it's just, growing up in West Virginia, like to me, it's like when I bought a record, I felt like I was like, just like, this is like early 80s. So like there's some pretty wild, like punk stuff that I was like seeing, but it's like, it's not just a record. It's like, it's someone's life. It's like the different culture, you know? So like I was buying a
Hmm.
record and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so different than where I am. Like, wow,
Right.
like Southern California or like New York City or, like Europe, or like, this is like, holy, like crap, this is insane. And so I've always felt like I always wanted to have like, the ability to put out records, whether my band or, other people. And so I was working on Alternative Tentacles and I started a label on the side called Sound on Sound. And I put out probably about 8 records in about 2 years. And, I lost a lot of money because I didn't know what I was doing, but I put
Sure.
out some good records. And then I felt like I always had it in me, like, oh, I'm playing in Glaciers. And like, we're like, me and the drummer Dennis, like we're putting out these records ourselves and they're selling. And like, wow, this is so cool. It's like, it was so anti music industry to me. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
we don't have a manager, we don't have like an agent, we don't have like any of these like we're our own record label. Like you said the word DIY. It's like, yeah. I mean, it's like like we're like paying someone to press the records, we're packing them up and we're mailing them to people. It's like this is the most amazing thing ever, and like it's so anti music
Corporate
industry.
world.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so like the way, in a lot of ways it's like this isn't how it works, but this is the way it should work, you know
Mhm.
and I've always been inspired by like labels like Discord and Touch and Go, and I mean SST, and like people, because there was a community of people in the 80s, 90s, even today, that they did the same way. And so it's like just people inspiring each other. But so the label, so I know Justin, I put out some records from Justin's band on my former label Sound on Sound. Jason, a friend of mine from here in LA, like we had kind of kicked around some ideas because like we wanted to do something. Like we originally talked about doing like maybe a record store, and then we talked about like there were a couple of like projects that I always thought would be cool to come out on vinyl that I wanted to reissue, or there was a new band that recorded an album that like I wanted to put out. So we talked about it, and like we included Justin, and we just we're learning as we go along. It's a completely different world in 2023 when it comes to, you know, selling records. It's different than the way it used to be. But I don't know if there was any kind of grand like master plan or anything like that. It was just, it was for the love of music and love of like the format of vinyl records, and like, it's just, I don't know. It's, I mean, that's kind of hard to answer. It's like, why do we do it? I don't know, because we wanted
This
to.
makes
We
you feel
wanted to.
good. Yeah.
Makes you feel good,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
same reason why I play guitar in the band. It's like, why do I do it? Because I don't know, I like it. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
It's
And
cool.
and well, and with these artists that you have reissues, you have new artists that you work with, but you want like each record to tell a story. So like,
Hundred
what do you
percent.
think? Like, What do you think so crucial about that and having that theme?
Because I think back when I was like getting the music when I was 12 or 13. Like I was so just like you getting a record and you looking at it and just looking at the lyric sheet or just reading about stuff and just being like, wow, what is this? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
this is,
liner notes.
yeah. And I mean, and I think that like a lot of people that, probably come from like a tiny town that maybe didn't have that kind of like culture or whatever. I think that a lot of people understand because like, I always ask my wife about stuff because she's, essentially grew up in California. I'm like, did you guys see bands play like when you were younger? Like, did you know about this kind of stuff? Or I ask my friends that grew up in Orange County and they're telling me these stories and stuff, or even like, San Francisco. You're just like, wow. So you mean to tell me that you didn't have to drive 7 hours to see a band or like find a record store? Like, that's the most amazing thing. So, I mean, not every record is gonna, will essentially tell that story, but yeah, I think that's the goal, and I think that any band that we put out will say that that's also, their goal, but we're doing like a mixture of, older stuff that we're trying to like, be like an archival label and also like new bands. I think it's important that you do both. And we put out like, oh man, like I think we've done 11 or 12 records this year. So it's been a, Jason's done he's done an enormous amount of work, on this, and it's cool. I think we're finally starting to get things together and kind of like understand the process of being a record label from three guys in their late 40s and all that. Because we're not, I
So
mean, like
there's
we're not, because I mean, the kind of bands we're putting out, it's not like, I wouldn't say pop music. We're not opposed to it,
right.
but
Well, is there like a theme or elements that you like the artist to sort of share in common? Is it that 90s sound?
no, because everything's been different. I think that
Mm.
for the projects I've worked on, I think like a lot of them were like friends of mine or just like certain things. Like one of the first records we did was this band, Nuzzle, and these were guys that they're friends of mine from like the '90s, and like my old label put out like a 7-inch record from them, and I'd always had this tape of they essentially recorded an album for Sub Pop subsidiary that went away, and I think they ended up re-recording some of the songs for another album, but I always thought that like this tape I had, this original session was like so much better, and just in my opinion. And I always like, oh, I wish somebody would put that out, and I think that, but I think that's it's kind of like an important theme. Like, you can think, or like I wish someone would do this, or you can do it. And like the cool thing is like if you put your heart to it and your mind to it, you'd be surprised. You can accomplish a lot of things. You know what I mean? And I think that's just who I am. Like I don't know if it's I'm somewhat stubborn and also determined, but I just it was very important to me. Like I like this tape. I want to put it out, and I'm still friends with these guys, and they love the idea,
Mhm.
and so we put it out. I mean, it's you know
It's like as simple as that. You make it seem simple. There's a lot of work in the behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, there's a ton of work, but I think that the idea behind it is really important, and that like if there's something you want to do, like you should really set a goal for yourself and figure out how am I going to make this happen.
Mhm.
And I think that's always been like who I am when it comes to like my jobs and career and stuff, because like sometimes it's pretty wild to think back like, oh man, like I grew up in like this nice small town in West Virginia, and now like I've built this like really awesome life for myself and like in Los Angeles, and it's like, wow, like how did that happen? You know? And I think it's like, determination, and you got to follow your heart, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
and have some luck, I guess. I don't know.
well, luck definitely plays a part. Obviously, you have a lot of experience. Just, I mean, thinking, just listening to you talk about coming here in, when you were 22, all the jobs sort of built into like what you're doing. You were already doing it. It feels like 2 decades ago.
Joe, but I also like I have to say like I think that as a father now, I don't want my daughter to ever have
Yeah,
to because I think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I came to like California when I was 22 with like barely any money and like no job and like no place to live, and I knew two people, and it's like talk about something that has the potential for a complete complete failure. It's like it's that because like I remember I came here and like I started working at a coffee shop, and like I'm sure that my parents were like, wow, you went to college and you came to California and now you're working at a coffee shop. Like there's nothing wrong with that,
sure.
but like I think it's more a reflection of like upon like how expensive it is
Yeah.
here. And then I just within like a month I got I guess you could say like in a lot of ways my dream job at that record label.
Yeah. So I think we all had that, right? Everyone comes out here and they expect, oh man, New York, LA. And when you start to like break down, whoa, there's not like job waiting for you just because you have a college degree, and it kind of hits
Yeah,
you.
I know. It does, man. And it's like, I mean, I feel incredibly grateful for everything I've done because even, some missteps that I made or mistakes, it's all part of like it's who you are, and it kind of builds into your stuff. And like, I feel incredibly grateful now for, my job at Sandbag. But I wouldn't want to do that again. Like, I wouldn't want to just drive across the country without like a
Yeah.
plan. But when you're that age, like I think it's life can be life can be really hard, but it can also be really forgiving.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you just kind of it's okay to make those kind of mistakes when you're younger. But
Oh, yeah. And, we make these mistakes so our kids don't have to. Right? So, like, going right, looking at solid brass for now, right? Like, what are the plans for the three of you, for people listening, for fans? What do you have in store for the next chapter? You said you almost at 12, almost like one record a month this year. What are you? What's the goal for next year?
well, we've got essentially I think we've got three or four other albums that like in the that are at the pressing plant or about to be pressed. And then there's a few other projects we're working on. I mean, I think that right now for us, it's just continuing to like do what we do. And like, you know, what's very important for me is like, it happens very often that like when a record comes out, then it's like a lot of labels just move on to the next one. It's almost as if like the album campaign is done with on day two of the release. And like, I hate that. So I think what's really important for us is that like we just continue to like try and like find new ways for people to discover the music, and we're trying to get people on like more like podcasts, more like Spotify playlists
Mhm.
because a lot of the bands like they can't really afford to tour, and also like some of the records are like reissues, so there's no
Sure.
touring. So it's a different landscape this year or in 2024 how to like sell records. But I think what's really important for me is that we just we don't stop once the album's out.
Hmm.
We're continuing to either try and find placement for the music and movies or TV shows or more playlists, or getting people on podcasts. But because I feel like for me, it's like I didn't really talk about this, but like I feel an enormous amount of responsibility. But both on like the merchandise side for like clients, but also like on my record label. It's like it's my job to like, get their art out there. And like I don't want to let people down because that would be a bummer to me if it just like if it just comes out and flops. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay, so taking like music and merchandise and obviously, evolving trends, challenge, technologies that sort of, do you see like, how do you see the future of artists interacting with their fans and monetizing their work just based on your experience, but where you see the industry heading?
I mean, I think it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. I think it's that personal
Yeah.
touch. I think that, the closer that a fan, and this probably apply to like both sides, the closer that a fan can feel to the
Mhm.
artist, I think it's probably the best win you can have. And I think it's just going to be a process for everyone of like, well, how do you do that? And I don't think that there's really, an answer. It's like maybe it's the VIP experience. Like maybe, like bands will start hand delivering records to the fans. Like I don't know, but like, I think that like I always see it like like when you widen that gap between the artist, and their
Mhm.
fan base. I've always felt like that's when, people start to they lose me, or they get lost, and it's like there's either that live concert experience, you know I mean, I don't know. I think that's what everyone's trying to figure out right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So well, like, do you ever draw experience like, okay, say you're at Sandbag, but then you're also making decisions at Solid Brass, your label. Do they ever like, do the two worlds ever like, overlap, collide, or even complement?
Not really. I mean, Sandbag does the fulfillment for our record label for the D2C, the e-com. But, I felt like when I went into it, I was like, oh, okay, well, like the album comes out, let's say on December, this Friday, December, what is it, December
Mhm.
8th. Let's just say that, for example. Well, like, and I'm talking Solid Brass right
Sure.
now. So my experience with working with a lot of bands is like, well, we can't ship that album out early because it doesn't come out until this Friday, So it's like, oh man, like we have to quarantine the records and they'll be sitting like in our warehouse for like a couple weeks. The one thing I thought about for our label was like, who cares? If the album's coming out like December 15th and we've got them November 15th, let's ship them early. And it's interesting because like I don't think that a lot of artist managers that I work with on the merchandise side, I don't think they probably want to do that because, there's an enormous amount of like buildup and like work that goes in to the planning and the campaign. And you don't want your partner to just ship it early because then all of us like, back in the day, like the problem would be like it would leak,
Mm.
you know, like it would leak because people would always have these little download cards that you buy a record and they could put it on the internet. Like, I don't know if that really happens that much nowadays, but for our label, I just thought, okay, if you're trusting us and you're buying it early from us, I'll send it to you early. So I
Yeah.
kind of did the opposite,
No,
but
no, that's
but I think that like that's one thing that's important that I learned is like, well, if the music industry tells you that you do it this way, I just think like that doesn't make sense. I'm a fan. I don't want to wait like a month. I want it early, So
so then if you're so okay, so that makes sense. If you're it all comes back to me still to this, like you said, the human touch, making that sort of across the board seems to be like the key theme. But you also mentioned you play in a band. You played with these guys for a good while from the Bay Area, Glaciers, right? So like, how much do you think you being a musician plays a role into just the endeavors in life?
100%, 100%, 100%. I mean, you're a musician. You understand. I mean, I always like when I'm put in kind of situations that like maybe are difficult. Like I think I'm talking more on the merchandise side because I work with a lot of like really large, well-known artists. And if there's ever like an issue or something comes up, I mean, that's the first thing I think of is
Mm.
like, what would the band think? Because you have to understand, like on my side of things, like with merchandise, there's a lot of layers. We're not always
Mhm.
dealing with the band directly. There's 99% of the time there's an artist manager and management team that you're dealing with middle people, and and a lot of times that's great. but like if there's ever an issue, the first thing I think of is like,
Mhm.
like what would the band think? If I was in the band, like,
Mhm.
would I be happy about this? You know, but I think that
No,
I forget your original question, but like that's I think it as a musician, like it's almost like common sense or in my DNA. But I also think like you don't necessarily need to be a musician to like think that way. I think that if you like a lot of us that kind of came up in that kind of like that independent music or punk rock scene, I think it was this has always been very band and fan like centric rather than like machine or corporate kind of stuff, and I think that it's a matter of like what's fair, you know doing what we think is the right thing to do. And I think that like to my gut, my core, that's always the way that I'll look at things is like what's fair to the artist, fair to the company, but mostly fair to the artist.
yeah, no, for sure. So then what about like musical consumption, right? So like for people who okay, so from like okay, we're streaming, we have physical products, we still have vinyl, but everyone has some sort of a platform that they listen to music through streaming, right? You mentioned the importance of getting on playlists and things like that. So where do you see like the future of people consuming music? Where do you think that's heading, or maybe technologies that could excite or concern you, depending on what they're going to potentially do to the industry?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely streaming 100%. I mean, I think that's what everybody does now. I mean, including myself. I listen to like music on my phone when I go running or when I'm in the car or even when I'm at home. I think that it's very important for people though to have the ability to purchase, a physical object to support their favorite artists. I think if we're talking about, music, I think I don't think it'll ever be the way it used to be. I think that we've seen that you read it like, oh, vinyl sales are back. And, I think that for a lot of artists, that's true. I'm sure Taylor Swift has sold like 1 billion copies of her record, and that's rad. But I don't like like back in the day, like if you to be like a top 10 Billboard artist for like a charting week, I mean you'd have to sell like over 100,000 like physical records. Now for actual physical, I'm not about streaming, but now for actual physical, it's like for a really solid album campaign for a large artist. I mean, if you sell 10,000 physical records, that's really good. That's really good. Most people won't do that. And it'll chart, for even such a smaller amount mostly because of the digital spins. But I definitely think that like digital is not going away. I think that if anything, it's just, you know, think about like my daughter like discovering music, just like the way that she learns about music is through like YouTube or Spotify through her friends, and then it's like, oh, what is this CD thing? Or like, it, you know, I don't want to say that physical records are an afterthought, you know, because I refuse to think that, but it's not what it used to be. But like the one thing I'll say on the merchandise side of things, I think that's where people certainly are able to really support, their favorite artists because if there's a band that you love and they have a new album out, let's say you buy that one album. Okay, you bought that. You have that now. But it's easy for an artist to have like 10 different t-shirt designs or 10 different merchandise things. And you can continue to do that. And like, artists will, their line of merchandise will always be evolving, so um, I think that on the merchandise side of things, like the e-commerce, the D2C, there's just always going to be new ways for you to support your artists with that. That's where the opportunity is in a lot of ways, in my opinion, the physical object.
So for people who are listening, right, you have obviously your Sandbag, you have solid brass, You have your band Glaciers. Where would be like the best way for people to connect with you, or even like social media, just to get to know more about you and follow you and all the cool stuff you're doing?
Probably like on Instagram, under my name, Chuck Pettry, Pettry. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. So I'm not really a Facebook person. So,
Yeah, I know. It's everyone's got their favorite platform.
what did you contact me on Facebook and I ignored you or
No,
something?
no, no, no. We were on Instagram. We're somewhere in the meta world, but we were on Instagram.
Oh, I always forget that they're in the same company, right?
Oh yeah, WhatsApp. He's got them all. So one day he keeps growing that empire. But yeah, man. So thank you for taking the time today. It's been awesome just getting to know. I mean, I knew a lot about what you did in the last decade, but I didn't know all these precursors that kind of came to like how they all kind of took form in what you're doing today. It was pretty cool to hear, and I think people listening can definitely just gain a lot about just things in the industry they probably didn't even know existed. So I think you shed a lot of light on just that part of the music world. So I thank you for that, and for sharing all that your insights and your story with us.
Yeah, of course, Joe. It's been great talking to you. I feel really honored that you would want to talk to me about all this stuff. So it's been great.
Well,
And I'm super happy for you for your podcast. And I look forward to hearing more episodes. And I hope to see you and your family again soon. So
yeah, we will definitely do it. But thank you so much again, and we'll make a plan to catch up.
cool. Good talking to you, my man.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Experience Curve. Please take the time to share this podcast with a friend or colleague to help get the word out about my show.